Hello, and thanks for coming to my show. If you don't already know, this show is done in themed seasons, and we're on Season 18, Killer Kids. If you like this channel, not necessarily the crimes, you can hit like on the video and subscribe to the channel for weekly stories. You can also check out my other channel, Somewhere Sinister, which isn't entirely true crime, more true crime adjacent. A link is in the description. Thanks. In late 1871, Boston, Massachusetts became the stage for a series of horrifying attacks on young children. A mysterious assailant, later dubbed the Boy Torturer and the Red Devil, began targeting vulnerable victims. The attacker's modus operandi was chillingly consistent. He would befriend children, offer them money and treats, and then lure them to remote locations where he would subject them to brutal beatings and, in some cases, sexual assault. When the identity of the attacker was finally uncovered, the city would be shocked at the horrible acts that could be carried out by someone so young. This is Monsters. Jesse Pomeroy was born on November 29, 1859, near Boston, Massachusetts, to Thomas J. and Ruth Ann Pomeroy. From the moment he entered the world, Jesse stood out due to a striking physical abnormality. A thick white film covered the pupil of his right eye, creating an appearance that set him apart from others. That birth defect would play a significant role in shaping his early experiences and interactions with those around him. Adding to his physical challenges, Jesse's mother, Ruth Ann, made a decision that would have far-reaching consequences. When Jesse was only a few weeks old, she took him to get a smallpox vaccination, as Boston was experiencing waves of smallpox epidemics throughout the mid-19th century. The vaccination had a catastrophic effect on the infant, leaving his body covered with weeping sores for months. Ruth Ann later claimed that event had a profound impact on her son, stating, quote, "I think his vaccination had more effect on him than anything else." The severe reaction to the vaccination not only caused Jesse moderate to severe pain and chronic stress at an incredibly young age, but also interfered with the crucial process of attachment with his mother. Unable to touch her son for months, Ruth Ann's bond with Jesse was compromised during a critical period of development. Jesse's family life was marked with instability and hardship. He was the second son of Thomas Pomeroy, an alcoholic dockyard worker. Jesse had an older brother, Charles, who was 17 months his senior. The family dynamic was far from nurturing, with Thomas subjecting Jesse to horrific physical abuse from a young age. The common punishment inflicted by his father involved taking Jesse out to the outhouse, stripping him naked, and striking him with a belt until blood was drawn. That brutal treatment left deep emotional scars on the young boy and likely contributed to his future behavioral issues. From an early age, Jesse exhibited signs of troubling behavior. He struggled to fit in at school, becoming the target of vicious bullying due to his physical appearance. In response, Jesse turned to bullying those smaller and weaker than himself. He became a loner, preferring to spend his time reading cheap dime novels filled with blood, gore, and mayhem. Some might call them the equivalent of today's violent movies. Jesse's violent tendencies began to manifest in disturbing ways. Before his 10th birthday, he killed his mother's songbirds by tearing their heads off. He was later caught torturing a neighbor's cat with a knife. Those acts of animal cruelty were early indicators of the severe behavioral issues that would escalate as Jesse grew older. Despite those troubling signs, Ruth Ann believed that her son's issues stemmed from the bullying he endured. She thought that if others stopped bullying him, he would stop bullying others. Even when Jesse began to torture and kill small animals, Ruth Ann saw that as a sign of his sadness rather than a serious cause for concern. As Jesse approached his 11th birthday, his behavior took a dark turn. Between the fall and winter of 1871, he began trapping and attacking other younger boys. He would lure them to hidden spots, strip off their clothes, and tie them up. Then he would subject them to severe beatings. As his actions escalated, Jesse started using a knife and even poked pins into the flesh of his victims. The first documented attack occurred on February 21, 1872, when 7-year-old Tracy Hayden of Chelsea was beaten and abandoned on Powderhorn Hill. That incident marked the beginning of a terrifying spree that would shake the community to its core. On May 20th, 8-year-old Robert Mayer fell victim to a similar assault, found beaten in an abandoned outhouse in Chelsea. The violence escalated on July 22nd, when 7-year-old Johnny Balch was discovered tied up and beaten in another abandoned outhouse on Powderhorn Hill. As news of the attack spread, public anxiety reached a fever pitch. On July 28th, the Boston Globe reported that the public are considerably excited about the actions of a fiendish boy believed to be behind the assaults on Tracy Hayden, Robert Mayer, and Johnny Balch. On August 2, 1872, Ruth Ann made a fateful decision. She left Chelsea with her 2 sons and settled at 312 Broadway Street in South Boston. That move came after Thomas, Jesse's father, had abandoned the family. Little did the community know that relocation would bring the reign of terror to a new neighborhood. The attacks continued with alarming frequency in South Boston. On August 17th, 7-year-old George Pratt was discovered by a local fisherman after being savagely beaten. Less than a month later, on September 11th, 7-year-old Joseph Kennedy fell victim to the assailant. Joseph was lured to a vacant boathouse near the South Boston-based salt marshes where he was beaten and cut with a pocket knife. The violence reached a horrifying peak on September 17th. Railroad workers walking along the Hartford and Erie line in South Boston made a shocking discovery. 5-year-old Robert Gould had been tied to a telegraph pole, beaten and slashed with a knife. A breakthrough in the case came on September 20, 1872. Jesse, then just 12 years old, peered into the window of South Boston's Police Station 6. Inside, Joseph Kennedy, one of the victims, immediately identified Jesse as his attacker. The boy was promptly arrested and admitted to being the boy torturer. Subsequently, the rest of Jesse's victims also identified him as their assailant. The following day, on September 21st, Jesse was arraigned before Judge William G. Forsyth. In a shocking turn of events, the young boy confessed to the attacks. Given his age, Jesse was sentenced to 6 years at the House of Reformation in Westboro. However, his sentence would prove to be tragically inadequate. On February 6, 1874, Jesse was released due to model behavior. That decision came on the recommendation of Police Captain Dyer of Station 6 and State Board of Charities agent Gardner Tufts. On March 18, 1874, just 6 weeks after Jesse's release from reform school, a chilling incident occurred that would mark the beginning of his escalation to murder. As Jesse was opening his mother's dressmaking shop and his brother's newsstand across the street from their home in South Boston, 10-year-old Katie Curran entered the store. Dressed in a black and green plaid dress and a ragged overcoat and scarf, Katie asked Jesse if they had any notebooks. Jesse, seizing the opportunity, told Katie that there might be some in the store downstairs and offered to show her. As they descended the cellar stairs, Katie realized too late that she had been tricked. In Jesse's own chilling words, quote, "I followed her, put my arm around her neck, my hand over her mouth, and with my knife cut her throat." He then dragged her body behind the water closet and covered it with stones and ashes. The gruesome details of Katie's murder would only come to light later. Her head had been completely severed and the decomposition of her upper torso made it impossible to determine other wounds. Most disturbingly, Jesse had savagely attacked Katie's abdomen and genitals. After the murder, Jesse calmly washed his hands and returned to work as if nothing had happened. Katie's disappearance caused immediate concern in the neighborhood, with her mother Mary frantically searching for her. When Mary learned that Katie had been sent to Mrs. Pomeroy's store, she nearly fainted, having heard of Jesse's reputation. As weeks passed, the police investigated various leads, including the possibility that Katie had been kidnapped. Her body remained undiscovered until July 20th, when the building was being renovated after being sold. Jesse's murderous rampage continued on April 22nd, when 4-year-old Horace Millen of South Boston disappeared. Neighbors reported seeing the young boy in the company of a bigger boy. That same afternoon, at 3:45 p.m., Horace's body was discovered at Savin Hill Beach. Jesse later confessed that he had decided to torture and kill Horace the moment he saw him. He lured the boy across a marsh, helping him across a wide ditch. When Horace sat down, Jesse took out his pocket knife, the same one he had used to kill Katie Curran, and in a fit of rage, slashed the boy's throat. The attack was brutal and prolonged. When his initial attempt failed to kill Horace, Jesse went berserk, repeatedly stabbing the helpless child. The crime scene revealed the horrifying extent of the violence. Jesse had attempted to castrate the boy, mutilating his scrotum. Deep gouges in the sand made by Horace's flailing legs and the dozen cuts on his arms and hands indicated that the child had died an excruciating death. At 10 p.m. on the day of Horace's murder, police officers arrived at the Pomeroy home and took Jesse into custody. He was taken to the Charles Street Jail. 2 days later, on April 24, 1874, while already imprisoned and awaiting trial for Horace Millen's murder, Jesse confessed to Katie Curran's death as well. The community was left reeling from these horrific crimes. On April 25, 1874, Horace Millen was buried. His parents, John and Leonora, were so poor that they couldn't afford a coffin. In a show of community support, individuals across South Boston, including police officers at Station 6 and John Millen's co-workers at Clark's Cabinet Factory, donated money to the family. The trial began on December 8, 1874, in the Massachusetts Supreme Judicial Court in Boston. It was a sensational event, making front-page news across the nation. Despite its prominence, the trial was surprisingly brief and straightforward. The prosecution, led by Attorney General John May, presented a dry recitation of the murder statute and evidence against Jesse. Witnesses were called to place Jesse with Horace on the day of the killing, and police officers testified about the footprint evidence and Jesse's confession. Jesse's defense attorney, Charles Robinson, took a different approach. He recounted Jesse's life and crimes in lurid detail, including the murder of Katie Curran, for which Jesse was not on trial. Robinson then focused on an insanity defense, arguing that Jesse could not control his impulses. Key testimony came from Jesse's mother, who described her son's childhood illnesses and mental ailments. Neighbors and teachers also testified about Jesse's disturbing behavior and violent tendencies. On December 10th, the jury found Jesse Pomeroy guilty of first-degree murder. The jury recommended mercy due to the defendant's youth, but the judge still sentenced him to death by hanging. However, the legal battle was far from over. Jesse's attorney filed 2 exceptions, which were overruled in February of 1875. Governor William Gaston refused to sign the death warrant, leading to a prolonged process involving the governor's council. After 3 votes over a year and a half, Jesse's sentence was finally commuted to life in prison in solitary confinement in August of 1876. On September 7th that same year, Jesse was transferred from the Suffolk County Jail to the state prison at Charleston, where he began his life in solitary confinement. During his time in solitary confinement, Jesse claimed to have taught himself several foreign languages, including Hebrew and German. He also wrote poetry and studied law books, using his time to compose legal challenges to his conviction and requests for a pardon. Despite his isolation, Jesse's time in prison was far from uneventful. He made numerous attempts to escape, showcasing remarkable ingenuity and persistence. A psychiatric report from 1914 noted that Jesse had made 10 or 12 determined attempts to escape. Prison officials frequently found handmade tools in his possession, including rope, steel pens, and a drill that he had managed to conceal in his cell or on his person. One particularly dramatic escape attempt resulted in Jesse losing an eye. In 1917, after decades in solitary confinement, Jesse's sentence was commuted to allow him the privileges afforded to other life prisoners. Initially resistant to that change, he eventually adjusted and even appeared in a minstrel show at the prison. In 1929, as an elderly man in frail health, Jesse was transferred to Bridgewater Hospital for the criminally insane. That transfer finally allowed him a glimpse of the world denied to him for 53 years. Jesse Pomeroy died on September 29, 1932. He was 72 years old. This story is a stark reminder of the complex nature of human behavior and the dark potential that can lurk within even the youngest members of society. The case challenged prevailing notions about juvenile delinquency and forced a reevaluation of how society deals with troubled youth after they carry out the deeds of a monster. If you're a fan of true crime, hit subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss an episode. You can also hit like or leave us a comment. You can check out our other show, Somewhere Sinister, on YouTube or anywhere that you listen to podcasts. If you'd like to support the show, check out our merchandise at thisismonsters.com. The link is in the description. Thanks again, and be safe.